Musa Nalakrusa!
Aloha, everybody. I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Now, first of all, I'd like to apologize that my previous episode was uploaded after a 4-week-long hiatus. What happened was I was sick with a cold, and unfortunately, my Mustang powers are starting to weaken. Not only due to my heart still being infected by the late COVID welder's doom spell, but also due to so much negativity from people who have been saying such mean things on my channel lately. I mean, do those people have such a miserable life that they want to pick on an autistic Mustang boy? I'm only trying to make folks happy by spreading some optimism. Sheesh. Anyway, on to the main subject. It's been about 23 years since Stitch first came to life on the big screen in the 2002 animated Disney classic Lilo and Stitch. Over the years, Stitch has become one of Disney's beloved and famous characters, next to Mickey Mouse, Jiminy Cricket, Tinkerbell, and several others. And his 2002 animated film has received a major cult following over the years. And aside from that movie, which I blogged back in 2022, Stitch has got 3 sequels, all of which I blogged during 2023, a TV series, 2 anime shows, a theme park attraction in Florida, which unfortunately became extinct in 2018, a crossover appearance in the Japanese Tiki Room, and he's had several appearances in the Kingdom Hearts game series. And just recently, Stitch has returned to the big screen in live action. And this new reimagining is what I'll be looking at today. So, without further ado, released on May 23rd, 2025, the movie is Lilo and Stitch. So, let's get started, shall we? A mischievous genetic experiment known as Experiment 626, whom is designed to destroy, is on the run from the Galactic Federation. Soon, 626 crash lands on Earth and meets a lonely little Hawaiian girl named Lilo, whom names him Stitch. While spending time with her and causing some mayhem along the way, Stitch begins to learn the value of Ohana, and he tries to help Lilo mend her broken family. At the same time, Stitch is being hunted down by not only his creator, Dr. Jumba but also the CIA. So, what did I think of this movie? Well, in my opinion, this has got to be one of the best remakes ever made by Disney. While not exactly perfect compared to masterpieces like the 2016 Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast 2017, and Cinderella 2015, or personal favorites like the 2023 Little Mermaid, The Lion King, and Aladdin 2019, but at least it's a lot better than 1996's 101 Dalmatians. And to further explain what I mean, let's head over to Mustang Notes. On October 3rd, 2018, it was announced that Walt Disney Pictures was developing a live-action / computer-generated animation hybrid film remake of Disney's 2002 animated feature Lilo and Stitch. The film was set to be adapted by Mike Van Weiss, produced by Dan Lin and Jonathan Erich, and co-produced by Ryan Halprin. On October 24th, 2018, Van Weiss revealed that he began to work on the remake script. On November 13th, 2020, John and Chu entered talks to direct the film, while Van Weiss was reported to have left the project, with the studio looking for a new screenwriter to rewrite Van Weiss's script, though Chu would ultimately not direct the film due to other obligations. On July 14th, 2022, Deadline Hollywood reported that Dan Fleischer Camp, the director of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, was chosen to direct instead, while Chris Bright was in talks to rewrite the script. Bright was fully confirmed to be the writer in February 2023. The day after Deadline Hollywood's announcement of Fleischer Camp and Bright's involvement, Van Weiss quote tweeted from Deadline Hollywood's tweet on their article welcoming Fleischer Camp and Bright to the film's production, possibly indicating that he was still involved with the film. This was later confirmed by the Writers Guild of America West, listing both Bright and Van Weiss as the film's screenwriters. Principal photography was slated to start in Oahu, Hawaii on March 13th, 2023, and finish on June 16th. However, the first day of filming was delayed until April 17th. Also, on April 16th, 2023, a fire broke out in a trailer within the base camp of the film's set in Halewa, causing approximately $200,000 in damage. The trailer contained costumes that would have been used for the first 3 weeks of filming. The fire started before 11 p.m. HST and was extinguished by 1 a.m. the following day. Thankfully, there were no reported injuries, although the beginning of filming was delayed indefinitely. The Honolulu Police Department classified it as a first-degree arson and opened an investigation in response. Gee whiz, first Snow White had a fire disaster and now Lilo and Stitch? Man. Anyway, filming eventually began on May 1st, 2023, when a portion of the Kalaniole Highway was closed for the film's production. Unfortunately, filming was suspended in July due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Thankfully, it eventually resumed in February 2024 and finally wrapped up in early March of that very year. The film's visual effects were provided by George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic. Now, before I continue, I'd like to say that I got to see this movie twice in a row in theaters. Once with the people at Vocational Visions, and the second time with my pals, Andrew, Igor, Lake, and Peter. Anyway, the things that I liked regarding this movie is mostly the filming location in Oahu, Hawaii, which is where I attended my final summer camping trip at Camp Pupukea with the Boy Scouts of Troop 604, and that was way back in summer 2008. Plus, Oahu is where my friend and fellow Swan Princess fan Nathan Higa lives. Fun fact, this movie's release date, May 23rd, was on his birthday. And Nathan, if you're watching this video, I'd like to wish you a happy belated birthday. Anyway, back to the film. To me, the Hawaiian setting is very, very beautiful, and it kind of makes me wish I could have seen all that stuff while me and the scouts were there. Also, I think the opening prologue in space was very thrilling and epic. Plus, I kind of like that the movie is set in modern day, and to me, I think that was handled a lot better than how it was in 1996's 101 Dalmatians, 2014's Annie, the Hallmark Dinotopia franchise, and 2015's Gem and the Holograms. Also, I like that the movie includes references from not only the original film, with some slight changes, but also the sequel films and the TV series. By the way, some of my favorite scenes in this remake include the scene where Stitch crashes a wedding, the water fight scene at the luau, the part where Stitch hotwires a miniature Jeep like he does in Stitch the movie, and the scenes where Jumba and Pleakley cause some mischief while in human form, which to me were pretty funny, and I find it pretty cool that they have a weapon that can create portals. Plus, I also like how the movie expands on the meaning of ohana. You see, your family is not just your parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, or cousins, but also your closest friends and neighbors. Some films that included that example being Sesame Street's Follow That Bird, the Tigger movie, and Spy Kids 3D. Also, as I said during one of my acceptance speeches at Queen's Ball, I consider everybody at Musical Theater Village as part of my family. Another thing that I liked from this movie was the soundtrack, and I really liked that they got a lot of the original songs into this movie. First is Hele Papahi no Lilo a Mi Stitch, which is once again performed by Mark Kiali Ho'omalu and the Kamehameha School's Children's Choir. And to me, this song is very nostalgic and catchy, and like the original version, it makes me want to drum along on my knees.
The second song in the movie is Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride, performed by American Idol Season 21 winner Ian Tongi,
which in my opinion is equally as good as the original cover. Plus, I also like that this movie includes songs performed by the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley, which include Heartbreak Hotel, Suspicious Minds, Stuck on You, Devil in Disguise, Hound Dog, Aloha Oi, sung by Nani and Lilo respectively, and finally Burnin' Love, performed this time by Bruno Mars' nephews Nyjah Music and Zaya Rhythm. To me, listening to these songs really makes me love classic rock and roll even more, and I really hope that I can blog the 2022 Elvis movie if I can find a collaborator to help me. Anyway, that's all I got for Mustang notes. So, let's move on to the film's cast. Our main character, Experiment 626, aka Stitch, is once again voiced by Chris Sanders, who did animation for films like The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. He voice acted as Little Brother in Mulan and the Baby Baboon in Tarzan. Also, as a director, not only did he direct the 2002 Lilo and Stitch, but he also directed 2010's How to Train Your Dragon, the Croods films, the 2020 Call the Wild movie, and last year's The Wild Robot. In my eyes, Stitch is still as lovable and memorable as he was back in 2002, and Chris Sanders still does an amazing job voicing him. Plus, I like that Stitch is still clever, strong, mischievous, and sneaky, and I think some of his antics can be a bit gross, but still very funny. Also, I think the CGI animation for Stitch is absolutely spot on, and I've heard a couple rumors on social media stating that he could be Disney's answer to the Sonic trilogy. And, you know, I don't know if it's actually true, but I think that could be a huge possibility. Also to note, I found it pretty interesting that Stitch can burrow underground just like his cousin, Experiment 529, aka Digger. Plus, I found it very emotional when Stitch was forced to surrender in order to protect Lilo from Jumba, and I thought it was very brave of him to save Lilo from being pinned underneath a piece of Jumba's spaceship, and it was very heroic of him to save Lilo's family picture. Lastly to mention, the part where Stitch almost died from drowning not only brought back memories from Stitch Has a Glitch, but it also gave me Frankenweenie flashbacks. Our second main character, Lilo Pleakley, is played by newcomer Maya Kealoha. And to me, Maya does a really great job for her first film role, portraying a 6-year-old autistic Hawaiian girl who loves hula, surfing, and the wildlife, and she has a very special affinity for all things gross. Plus, some of you may not believe this, but I found it very adorable and sweet when I heard that Maya loved the 2025 Snow White movie. Anyway, like her animated counterpart, Lilo is very imaginative, yet rebellious, which usually gets her into trouble and ostracizes her from her classmates who consider her as a weirdie, mainly due to her neurodivergence or autism. And believe me, Lilo is one of several Disney characters who claim to have that disability. And again, I wouldn't have known that Lilo was autistic if Isaac the Media Hunter hadn't mentioned that in his review from 2 years ago. Anyway, unlike in the original film, which portrayed her and Nani's parents having died relatively recently prior to the film's events, their parents have been dead for a few years prior to the remake's events, with Lilo hiding her grief through relentless, fun-loving optimism. By the way, I was very scared when Lilo almost drowned during the surfing scene. I liked the part where Lilo teaches Stitch to be good during the Devil in Disguise sequence, and I thought Lilo was very brave to sneak onto Jumba's spaceship to rescue Stitch during the final climax. Next is her older sister and guardian, Nani, played by Sydney Elizabeth Ogadong. In this, Nani is described as intelligent, overachieving, athletic, type A, and a straight A student, who has been feeling the increasing pressures of having to take care of Lilo while maintaining her school grades and her job, which causes issues with her and Lilo's social worker, with Child Protective Services threatening to separate the Pleakley sisters and put Lilo into foster care. Now, in my opinion, Nani gets a lot of character development due to her wanting to study marine biology at the University of California, San Diego, and become a marine biologist. And while I did feel bad that Nani lost her job at the luau due to Stitch accidentally causing a fire, I did like that she got a job as a surfing instructor. Also, I liked the scene where Nani rescued Stitch from drowning nearing the end of the movie. Next we have David Kawina, played by Kaipo DuPoint. Fun fact, originally, Caio Machado was going to be cast in the role, but he was sadly recast shortly thereafter due to his prior usage of a racial slur. Ouch. Anyway, in this film, David is a loyal friend and neighbor to Lilo and Nani, and he performs the fire knife dance at the luau where Nani worked at before she was fired. Plus, I wish I could have mentioned this 3 years ago, but I think David makes a great big brother figure for Lilo. Plus, I didn't realize this as a kid, but David is described as fancy according to Nani's text messages, which is a modern substitute for her diary in the animated version. Next we come to Agent Cobra Bubbles, played by Courtney B. Vance, whom was in 1993's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Terminator Genesis, and Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. To me, Cobra is pretty similar but different from his animated counterpart. Yes, he's still a CIA agent, but what he does during this movie is investigate Stitch's crash site. He goes undercover as a social worker director, and he secretly takes a piece of Stitch's fur to study. Thankfully, later in the movie, Cobra realizes that Stitch is not a dangerous threat, and after defeating Jumba, he makes a negotiation with the Grand Councilwoman. Next on our list is Stitch's creator, Dr. Jumba Jookiba, played by Zach Galifianakis, whom was in DreamWorks' Puss in Boots, 2018's A Wrinkle in Time, Laika's Missing Link, Locksmith Animation's Ron's Gone Wrong, and last year's Thelma the Unicorn. Now, unlike in the animated film, this version of Jumba is a ruthless villain through and through. Why, you ask? Well, firstly, director Fleischer Camp believed that Gantu's arrival on Earth in the original film turned it into a more conventional movie, while making Jumba the villain added a more personal connection to the live-action film story, as Fleischer Camp saw him as a terrible, delinquent father figure for Stitch, saying, "You want your main antagonist to also be the representative of the theme of the film." It seemed like an opportunity to do that, as opposed to just, there's a big bad boss that comes down and is shooting lasers at everybody. And to be perfectly honest, I sort of see where he's coming from, and I believe that this makes Jumba the fourth villain in a live-action remake to not be a villain in the source material. The previous ones being King Stefan in Maleficent, the Grand Duke in Cinderella, and King Louis in The Jungle Book. Secondly, the reason for Gantu's absence in this remake was due to budgetary constraints. Anyway, throughout the movie, while hunting down Stitch, Jumba plans to eliminate the Grand Councilwoman, destroy the Galactic Federation, and take over the universe. Plus, in my opinion, while Jumba is very clever due to him hiding his spaceship in the ocean, and several of his antics were pretty funny, especially when he gets trapped in a portal loop, my one nitpick with him is his voice. Don't get me wrong, Zach Galifianakis is a great actor, and I believe his voice kind of works for his human disguise, but in his normal alien form, Jumba's American accent is a bit distracting and off. And it kind of makes me wish that I could have voiced him in this film, since, like with Stitch, I made a video on YouTube where I did my own voice impersonation as Jumba. If you guys haven't seen that video yet, I'll put a link to it in the description. Next we have Agent Wendell Pleakley, played by Billy Magnuson, whom was in 2014's Into the Woods and 2019's Aladdin. To me, Pleakley isn't that much different compared to his animated counterpart. Sure, he's still an Earth expert, and he tries to keep Jumba under control while trying to capture Stitch. However, the only things that are different about him is that he's very excitable about going to Earth, since he's always liked to go there, and he's also a hugger. He does not disguise himself in women's clothing, and I like that he becomes best friends with Cobra Bubbles. Now let's move on to the new characters, starting with Mrs. Kekoa, played by Tia Carrere, who voiced Nani in the original film, and she got to be in Duck Dodgers, the Wayne's World films, and Easter Sunday. This character is a social worker who is a by-the-book, kind, and patient woman who checks in regularly with Nani, whom she can tell is struggling with her duties as Lilo's guardian. Plus, I find it pretty cute that Maya Kealoha considers Mrs. Keikoa as one of her favorite characters in this film next to Cobra, Stitch, Lilo, and Pleakley. Another character to talk about is Tutu, played by Amy Hill, who voiced Mrs. Hasegawa in the original animated film and in the TV series, and she got to be in the 2003 Cat in the Hat movie, Big Fat Liar, Max Keeble's Big Move, Cheaper by the Dozen, and 50 First Dates. Now, Tutu is a native Hawaiian who is the longtime neighbor of the Pellet Guys and the grandmother of David Kalina. She's described as a warm, quick-witted woman who speaks with a local pidgin accent. Plus, I see her as a sweet grandmother figure for Lilo, and I like that she and David take full guardianship of her while Nani studies in California. Other actors in the film include Hannah Waddingham as the Grand Councilwoman, Jason Scott Lee, aka the original David, playing the luau manager, and Emery Hukanu Braille as the insufferable bratty Myrtle Edmonds. And now, on to my final words. Overall, the 2025 Lilo and Stitch movie is a very charming live-action remake. The cinematography is well done, the setting on Oahu is very breathtaking, and it makes me want to revisit there again someday, but more for sightseeing than camping, though. Also, ILM did a really great job with animating Stitch and the other aliens. The soundtrack is wonderful to listen to, and the story is equally as fun, humorous, and heartwarming as it was back in 2002. And I really love how it expands on the value of Ohana. So, if you folks are Lilo and Stitch fans, then be sure to give this movie a watch. And I'm sure you and your families will have an absolute blast. I give this film... oh, what the hey, I'm giving it a full 100%. So I had a nitpick with Jumba, so what? Anyway, that's all for now. Be sure to join me next time as we look at a Spanish animated film about mummies. Mustang Power. Oh, and to all my Hawaiian watchers out there, aloha!